Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a massive journey. We're going to trace the absolute arc of human intellect, starting all the way back with the jaw-dropping macro engineering of the ancient world, right down to the microscopic, hyper-exact precision of modern physics. It's essentially a story about how our ancestors looked out at this chaotic, honestly terrifying universe and just decided to measure it, to build in it, and ultimately to understand it. Here's the roadmap for our explainer today. We'll be hitting 1. Survival to civilization. 2. Engineering the Great Pyramids. 3. Preserving the pharaohs. 4. Mysticism and ancient texts. 5. The foundations of physics. And 6. The science of measurement. It's a wildly incredible leap from the ancient sands of Egypt to the rigid rules of modern science. So let's just jump right in.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. Survival to civilization.
Before we could ever build monuments or write out complex equations, our quest for knowledge started really simply, with a desperate need to just survive. And our story actually kicks off somewhere you might not expect, a lush green Sahara. For 6,000 years, during what scientists call the African humid period, the Sahara was literally packed with massive lakes and green savannas. Nomadic hunters lived in total harmony with nature there, even building the Nabta Playa stone calendar around 7,000 BC just to track the sun. But then, right around 5,500 BC, a tiny shift in the Earth's axis changed literally everything. The monsoons moved, the lakes turned to thick mud, and that beautiful green savanna scorched into the deadliest desert on Earth. This massive climate catastrophe forced diverse, totally terrified tribes to march in a single direction, just desperately looking for water. And they found an absolute miracle in the desert, the Nile River. This mass migration, that's what sparked the birth of human civilization. But here's the thing. The Nile wasn't exactly a gentle, babbling stream, right? It flooded violently every single year, leaving behind this thick, black, incredibly fertile mud. So to survive, these ancient humans had to become the world's very first engineers. They figured out that by digging small canals, they could actually trap those floodwaters right in their fields to grow wheat and barley. Suddenly, they aren't chasing animals around anymore. They're building permanent mud huts, they're storing massive surpluses of grain, which, by the way, became humanity's first real form of wealth. And with wealth comes the need for protection, for order, eventually leading this powerful leader named King Narmer to completely unite Upper and Lower Egypt. To keep this massive new society from falling apart, they instituted Ma'at, a foundational law of cosmic justice and balance.
All right, moving on to Section 2, Engineering the Great Pyramids.
So once mere survival was handled, human ambition just totally exploded. The drive to control the environment evolved into this wild desire to conquer time itself. Just look at this massive number, 2,300,000. That is the number of individual heavy stone blocks used to construct Pharaoh Khufu's Great Pyramid of Giza, 2.3 million. And remember, the engineers building this towering artificial mountain did the whole thing without iron tools, without pulleys, no wheels, and absolutely zero modern compasses. No way. The logistics here are just mind-boggling. This structure stood 481 feet tall. To build the king's chamber, they used 50-ton granite blocks that literally had to be floated 800 kilometers down the Nile from Aswan during the annual floods. But it's not even the heavy lifting that's the most impressive part, it's the math. Without a compass, they aligned the 13-acre base absolutely perfectly to true north. Plus, there's the Orion correlation theory, which points out that the three main pyramids of Giza perfectly mirror the exact alignment and even the varying brightness of the three stars in Orion's belt. Ancient Egyptians actually associated Orion with Osiris, their god of the afterlife, meaning they essentially projected a gigantic map of the stars right onto the Earth. Yet for all we know about it, the Great Pyramid is still a total mystery. Back in 2015, the International Scan Pyramids project sent these tiny little robots into 8-inch wide secret shafts inside the Queen's chamber, places no human could ever possibly fit. And what they found wasn't a mummy or a pile of gold. 200 feet up, the robot bumped into a mysterious stone door fitted with copper pins. And when they finally drilled through that door with an endoscope, they found another door. Advanced scanning has also revealed these massive, completely empty voids hidden deep within the structure. So even today, we still don't fully grasp the true purpose of this mathematically perfect puzzle.
Which brings us to Section 3, Preserving the Pharaohs.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is we're pivoting from the stone structures themselves to the, well, somewhat macabre reason these early engineers started building them in the first place: mummification. It was this highly rigorous 40 days scientific process. First, they extracted the brain entirely through the nose using a hooked iron tool. Yeah, pretty gruesome. Step 2 was removing the internal organs that rot quickly, like the liver and stomach. They deliberately left the heart right inside the chest because they believed it was the actual seat of the mind and soul. Step 3, the body was packed in a special salt called natron for 40 straight days to suck out all the moisture. Finally, it was heavily coated in cedar oil and resin, then wrapped up in literally thousands of meters of linen.
So why go to such incredible extreme lengths? Well, because ancient problem solving was deeply driven by a profound existential fear of the unknown. The ruling class basically instilled this belief that if the pharaoh's body rotted like an everyday person's, his soul couldn't travel to join the sun god Ra. And if that happened, the sun simply wouldn't rise, the Nile would totally dry up, and the entire universe would collapse into chaos. That absolute terror is what motivated an entire civilization to voluntarily haul millions of heavy stones. They weren't just building fancy tombs. In their minds, they were literally engineering the continued balance of the entire universe.
Moving on to Section 4, Mysticism and Ancient Texts. As human society kept evolving, our ancestors didn't just stop at building stone monuments to manage their fears. Think about it. Once you've learned to engineer the physical world with irrigation and giant stone blocks, the next logical step is trying to engineer the metaphysical world. As civilizations really grew and writing systems became much more advanced, humanity actively sought out ways to catalog the mysteries they couldn't physically build a wall against, things like disease, fate, and the invisible forces of nature.
A prime historical example of this is the documentation of esoteric knowledge. Texts like the Shams al-Ma'arif, which is attributed to the 13th century scholar Sheikh Abu al-Abbas Ahmad bin Ali al-Buni, represent these really early, incredibly structured attempts to organize the vast unknown. It's actually a lot like how an engineer categorizes different building materials, right? These ancient texts categorize spiritual and mystical forces into complex, multi-part volumes. It was basically humanity's way of forcing a logical framework onto the totally unexplainable.
Section 5, The Foundations of Physics.
Eventually, though, that framework completely shifted into the rigid, exact, and highly provable worlds of modern science. The core human desire to understand the universe hasn't actually changed since the days of the pharaohs, but our toolkit absolutely has. We evolved from solving problems with mythological macro-engineering, massive star alignments, and mystical texts, to utilizing physics, rigorous mathematical equations, and globally standardized units. We transitioned from fearing the unknown to systematically tearing it apart and dissecting it.
And the ultimate evolution of this whole quest is physics. Instead of relying on mysticism, physics gives us the actual framework to look at the chaotic natural world, the exact same world that terrified those ancient desert nomads, and decode its absolute rules. It is formally the study of matter and energy, sure, but on a much deeper level, it's humanity's ultimate tool for removing the fear of the unknown.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how we conquered that chaos. The International System of Units. We took the incredibly infinite, overwhelmingly complex physical world, and we standardized it into a universally agreed upon table of just 7 fundamental units. It's amazing. From length and mass all the way to temperature and luminosity, these 7 building blocks give us the power to measure and understand, quite literally, everything in the observable universe.
Which leads us to our final part, Section 6, the Science of Measurement.
Look, establishing standard units is one thing, but actually measuring them is a whole different ballgame. Take a look at this instrument right here, the Vernier scale, invented by the French mathematician Pierre Vernier. Before this came along, standard rulers could really only reliably measure down to about a millimeter. But by adding this sliding secondary scale right next to the main scale, Vernier gave humans the unbelievable ability to accurately measure tiny, fractional parts of a single millimeter without just guessing. It was a massive, game-changing leap forward in our quest for absolute micro-precision. And then, we went even smaller. This here is a screw gauge. Notice that really distinct U-shaped frame and the rotating thimble on the end. By using the ultra-precise pitch of a finely machined screw, this tool allows engineers and physicists to measure the thickness of a single wire or a tiny sheet of metal down to hundreds of a millimeter. We are inching closer and closer to atomic-level accuracy here. Just marvel for a second at how incredibly far our tools have come from the crude copper chisels and stone hammers that we're using on the Giza Plateau.
The absolutely crucial point to take away from all this is the incredible, unbroken evolutionary journey of human intellect. The exact same biological human brain that looked up at the night sky and somehow managed to mathematically align 2.3 million 50-ton stones without a single modern compass is the very same brain that thousands of years later invented the vernier scale just to measure the microscopic, invisible gaps between matter. It's the same brain.
And that epic journey brings us to universal truths. Under classical mechanics, we can now calculate the exact, predictable distances, quote, covered by objects undergoing constant acceleration, end quote. What used to be ancient priests nervously observing the stars to predict river floods eventually became unbreakable mathematical laws, laws that consistently govern everything from an apple falling from a branch to a massive rocket launching into orbit.
We've come from fighting for our basic survival in a drying desert to hauling 50-ton stones just to conquer death, all the way to standardizing the whole universe into 7 neat little units and building specialized tools to measure the width of a human hair. So as our tools continue to rapidly evolve, I'll leave you with this final thought. From monumental stones to absolute atomic precision, what invisible frontier will humanity measure next? Thanks so much for exploring with us, and as always, keep questioning the universe around you.